The most dangerous plant on Earth looks like something you'd buy at a garden centre. That's not a metaphor, it's a documented fact, and it's the reason 13 plants in this episode have collectively killed more people than most recorded natural disasters. Poison was never aimed at us. Evolution built these chemical arsenals for insects, fungi, competing root systems, threats that existed long before humans arrived. We just turned out to be extraordinarily easy targets. Here's the paradox at the center of this story. The more beautiful a plant, the more likely it ends up in a vase, a pot, a bridal bouquet, a child's reach. We are the only species that actively imports lethal organisms into our living spaces because we find them aesthetically pleasing, and because familiarity breeds the specific kind of carelessness that kills, not ignorance, but comfort. 13 plants, each one has killed, each one is killing right now.
Not in remote wilderness, not behind laboratory glass, in gardens, on office windowsills, along resort promenades, in the median strips of city streets. One of them stops a human heart so cleanly that it reads as natural cardiac arrest on autopsy. One strips a person of will and memory, leaving them functionally obedient to whoever holds their arm. One was weaponized by a government as a tool of political assassination. One gave the world its most iconic comic book villain. And the plant that opens this list delivers pain so severe and so persistent that survivors are still describing it years later, because the toxin remains embedded in the skin, biologically active, waiting for the right moment. The ranking here isn't built purely on lethal dose data. It's built on proximity to ordinary human life. How close did this organism get to someone who had no idea what they were touching? The further down this list you go, the clearer one thing becomes. The most dangerous thing in the plant kingdom never announces itself. One of the world's most poisonous plants is also one of the most deliberately planted. Oleander, Nerium oleander, lines the promenades of the Mediterranean, surrounds the pools of resort hotels, and fills the private gardens of Spain, Greece, Turkey, and Italy. It ranks 13th on our list, and it earns that place entirely. Every part of the plant is toxic: leaves, branches, flowers, seeds, roots, and even the smoke released when its wood burns. All of it carries oleandrin, a potent cardiac glycoside that disrupts the ion pumps responsible for regulating sodium and potassium balance inside the cells of the heart muscle. Once those pumps fail, the heart loses its rhythm. The result can be ventricular fibrillation and cardiac arrest. Oleandrin does not negotiate. It has no antidote you can grow in your garden. Toxicologists in the United States consistently list oleander among the plants responsible for the highest number of poisoning calls to poison control centers. In the 1990s, California recorded a cluster of cases involving children who had been playing with its branches. The mechanism behind those cases is the same one historians invoke when they describe a story about Alexander the Great's army. Soldiers who allegedly skewered meat on oleander branches and died. The single-source problem means that story cannot be fully verified, but the toxicology makes it entirely plausible. What gives oleander its particular power on this list is not just the chemistry, it is the setting. This plant was chosen, it was purchased, planted, watered, trimmed. It belongs to the designed landscape of leisure and beauty. It asks no questions and announces no warnings. That gap between appearance and lethality is the premise of everything that follows on this countdown. If oleander sits at number 13, the plants ahead of it are deadlier still, and the next one does not wait in a distant jungle. It is already growing in the nearest spring forest. Number 12 on our list is one of the most poisonous plants in the world, and it has spent centuries being handed to children as a symbol of happiness. Lily of the Valley, Convallaria majalis, is present in bridal bouquets, children's books, and some of the best-selling perfumes ever made.
In France, bunches of it are gifted on the 1st of May as tokens of good luck. In Finland, it is the national flower. The plant looks exactly as harmless as its reputation suggests. Small, white, bell-shaped flowers hanging from a curved stem, broad, lance-shaped leaves, a faint, sweet scent that has come to represent purity and the arrival of spring across dozens of cultures. Every part of it will poison you. The root, the leaves, the petals, the bright orange-red berries that ripen by late summer. All of them contain cardiac glycosides, most critically convalatoxin. This compound targets the heart muscle with a specificity that makes it genuinely dangerous, even in small quantities. It disrupts the sodium-potassium pumps inside cardiac muscle cells, triggers life-threatening arrhythmias, and, at sufficient doses, stops the heart entirely. The toxicity is high enough that water left in a vase with cut lily-of-the-valley stems becomes hazardous within a few hours. Documented cases exist of children drinking that water, mistaking it for plain water left on a table, and requiring emergency treatment. The berries present a separate and recurring risk: visually attractive, easily reachable, and reliably toxic. Symptoms develop quickly: nausea, irregular heartbeat, falling blood pressure, confusion. This is not a slow poisoning. Medical intervention cannot wait. There is, however, a further complication to the story. The same glycosides that make this plant lethal also attracted the attention of cardiologists. Its compounds have been studied and used in the treatment of heart conditions. Poison and medicine are the same substance. Only the dose separates them. The plant coming next on our list also conceals its danger beneath an inviting appearance, but it does not go after the heart. It goes after the mind, erasing memory, will, and the ability to resist. Here is a plant so popular it may be sitting in your living room right now, and yet it hides thousands of microscopic glass needles inside its stems. That paradox belongs to the Dieffenbachia, our number 11, one of the most common houseplants on Earth, prized for its broad leaves splashed with cream and pale green markings, and for how forgiving it is to careless owners. Why does something so decorative deserve a spot on this list? The answer lives in its milky sap. It is packed with calcium oxalate crystals, bundled into specialized structures botanists call rhaphides. Seen under a microscope, they are genuinely alarming. Thousands of ultrafine slivers, each as sharp as a shard of broken glass. When leaf tissue is damaged, pressure inside the cells launches these needles outward like tiny darts. If the sap reaches the lining of the mouth, they embed themselves in the soft tissue, while accompanying enzymes ramp up the inflammation. The result comes at once: burning pain, a flood of saliva, and rapid swelling. That swelling earned the plant its grim English nickname, dumb cane. A person who bit into a stem was said to lose the power of clear speech for a while, because the tongue, lips, and throat swelled so badly that talking became nearly impossible. There are historical accounts tied to plantation slavery, suggesting the stems were used as a tool of punishment and forced silence. A claim worth treating with caution, but one that has clung stubbornly to the plant's reputation. Fatal cases in adults are extremely rare, and the reason is almost darkly comic. The sap tastes so foul that swallowing any meaningful amount is close to impossible. The real threat lies elsewhere. If the swelling spreads to the larynx, it can seal off the airway and cause suffocation. The most vulnerable are small children who put leaves in their mouths and household pets who chew on them. So this quiet green resident of the windowsill turns out to be armed with an arsenal of crystalline needles. Yet the Dieffenbachia at least warns you with fire and pain. The next plant plays a very different game. It disguises itself as something fragile and almost fairy tale, watching its victim through what look unsettlingly like human eyes. The most dangerous plants in the world don't look dangerous. Number 10 on our list proves it with unsettling precision. White baneberry, Actaea pachypoda, produces berries that are, by any honest assessment, beautiful. Porcelain white, perfectly round, arranged in dense clusters on thick red stalks, and at the center of each berry, a dark spot, circular, concentrated, staring back at you. Americans named this plant doll's eyes, and once you've seen it, no other name makes sense. The reason that gaze is so effective as a warning comes down to chemistry. The berries contain a cardiogenic toxin that targets the heart muscle of mammals directly. The mechanism isn't fully mapped, but the outcome is documented. Even a small quantity of the pulp is capable of causing cardiac arrest in a human being. There is no reliable antidote. The plant doesn't wound or irritate, it stops the engine. What makes this toxicity remarkable is how precisely it is aimed.
Birds eat the same berries with no ill effects whatsoever. Their cardiac physiology is structured differently enough from ours that the toxin finds nothing to bind to. This isn't a side effect of the plant's defense strategy, it is the strategy. Birds disperse the seeds across the forest floor after eating the fruit. Mammals stay away or they die. The plant has effectively weaponized biology against one category of animal while recruiting another as its courier. White baneberry grows in the shaded understory of eastern North America's deciduous forests, where the canopy is thick and the soil stays moist. For most of the year, it is genuinely unremarkable, a low shrub with cut leaves and small white flowers that blends into the understory without distinction. Its threat is seasonal, materializing at the end of summer when those clusters of white eyes appear on their red stems. Reports suggest the berries taste unpleasant, which provides some protection. But taste is a warning system that requires contact first. And for young children, encountering bright white spheres at eye level in the woods, curiosity tends to move faster than caution. Number 10 watches from the forest floor. Number 9 doesn't bother hiding at all. It grows in living rooms. Number 9 on this list has a name that functions almost like a warning label written by poets. Atropa belladonna. Break it apart and you find two entirely different worlds collapsed into one. Belladonna, Italian for beautiful woman. Atropa, drawn from Atropos, the eldest of the three fates in Greek mythology, the one who held the shears, the one who cut the thread. Put them together, and the plant has already told you everything you need to know. Renaissance Venice understood this perfectly. Noble women there dropped diluted extracts of the plant directly into their eyes. The active compound, atropine, paralyzed the muscles controlling the iris. The pupil expanded, swallowing almost all visible color, leaving that wide, dark, unfocused gaze that the period considered the height of feminine beauty. Painters captured it, suitors chased it. The women who wore it paid in blurred vision, racing hearts, and dizziness that came and went like a tide. Beauty and slow damage, inseparable. The plant itself grows to nearly 5 feet, dull-leafed, faintly unpleasant to the nose. None of that matters when you see the berries. Black violet, glossy, the size of a cherry, and sweet. That sweetness is the real danger. A child might eat 5 or 6 before anyone notices. That is enough to kill. For an adult, 10 to 15 berries cross the threshold. Every part of the plant carries atropine and scopolamine, alkaloids that disrupt the nervous system in a predictable, terrible sequence. Dry mouth, fever, confusion, then hallucinations vivid enough that medieval chroniclers described the experience as fire burning from within. Witches, according to folklore, rubbed belladonna-based ointments onto their skin to fly. What they likely experienced was something closer to a violent, ungovernable dream. The plant hides its lethality behind the appearance of ordinary wild fruit. Our next entry didn't bother hiding at all. It simply made its berries look like human eyes and stared back. You can die from gardening. Not from a fall, not from a tool, from touching a flower with your bare hands. That is not a hypothetical. In 2014, a British gardener named Nathan Greenway did exactly that. He handled Monkshood, aconitum, number 8 on our list, without gloves, without cuts, without any break in the skin. Hours later, he was dead.
The coroner's finding was unprecedented in modern British legal history: death by transdermal aconitine poisoning. The plant had delivered its toxin through intact skin, and no one in a contemporary British court had ever recorded that before. The case became an immediate medical warning across Europe. Monkshood, also called wolfsbane, has carried the title of Queen of Poisons since ancient Greece, a reputation built long before written records began. Greek mythology claimed it grew from the saliva of Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld, and that origin story is almost too fitting. Because this plant looks like nothing you should fear, it is tall, architecturally elegant, crowned with dense clusters of blue-violet flowers shaped like a monk's hood, which is precisely where the English name comes from. There is no visual warning, no suspicious colour, no threatening silhouette, just cold, structured beauty. The mechanism behind that beauty is aconitine, an alkaloid neurotoxin that binds to sodium channels in nerve cells and prevents them from closing. The result is uncontrolled, cascading overstimulation, peripheral nerves first, then cardiac muscle. Respiratory paralysis and cardiac arrest follow within hours, depending on dose. Most plant poisons require ingestion. Aconitine does not. That single property, dermal absorption through unbroken skin, is what separates monkshood from nearly everything else in the botanical world. Deadly nightshade warms you with sweet berries. Baneberry makes its fruit conspicuous. Monkshood offers nothing. It stands in the garden bed and waits. The next plant on our list uses the same strategy of concealment, but deployed it on a scale that made it the weapon of choice for generations of deliberate poisoners. The deadliest poison known to science is growing in your local park right now, and nobody is stopping to worry about it. That is the central paradox of number 7 on our list, Ricinus communis, the castor bean plant, officially crowned by Guinness World Records as the most poisonous plant on Earth, is a fixture of ornamental gardens across every continent. It is large, striking, even beautiful. Broad palmate leaves in deep green or burgundy, clusters of spiny fruits that look like something from a tropical market stall. And inside those reddish-brown seeds lives ricin, a protein toxin that operates with a kind of cold mechanical efficiency that no synthetic poison has yet matched. Ricin does not simply damage tissue, it shuts down protein synthesis at the cellular level, deactivating cells one by one in a process that cannot be reversed and for which no antidote exists. The estimated lethal dose for a human being sits at around 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight, a quantity contained in just a handful of seeds. For context, ricin is approximately 6,000 times more toxic than cyanide. The numbers alone are extraordinary, but it was a rainy September morning in London in 1978 that gave ricin its permanent place in history. Bulgarian dissident Georgi Markov felt a sharp sting in his thigh as he crossed Waterloo Bridge. A man with an umbrella walked away. 4 days later, Markov was dead. The post-mortem found a platinum pellet, 1.5 millimeters across, drilled with tiny holes that had almost certainly held ricin. A garden plant, a Cold War assassination, a weapon of state terror, all connected by a toxin that still has no cure. Next on our list, another arrival from the tropics, but this one does not need seeds to kill you. A plant can make you hand over your bank codes, empty your own safe, and remember none of it the next morning. That is not fiction. That is what Brugmansia, number 6 on our list, has been doing in modern Colombia for decades. Brugmansia is native to the Andean valleys of South America. It grows into a tree several meters tall, draped in enormous trumpet-shaped flowers that hang downward like bells, reaching up to 30 centimeters in length. The colors run from white and cream to peach and soft pink. After dark, those flowers release a heavy, sweet fragrance that only grows stronger as the night deepens.
People across the world call it angels' trumpets, and the name fits perfectly. What it does not prepare you for is what comes next. Every part of this plant, every flower, every leaf, every seed contains scopolamine, atropine, and hyoscyamine. These are not mild compounds. Indigenous shamans in the Andes worked with brugmansia for thousands of years, using it in tightly controlled ritual doses to induce deep trance states, visions, and a temporary disconnection from ordinary reality. They believed it opened a passage to the spirit world. They also knew that the margin between a vision and a lethal dose was razor thin, and that knowledge was itself considered sacred. In contemporary Colombia, the plant's reputation took a different turn entirely. Scopolamine extracted from brugmansia is sold and used on the streets under the name burundanga. An almost invisible quantity dissolved into a drink or absorbed through skin contact is enough to eliminate a person's resistance while leaving their outward behavior intact. The victim follows instructions, cooperates fully, and wakes up the following day with no memory of what happened. Colombian authorities recorded hundreds of such cases each year. Robberies, kidnappings, crimes carried out by the victims themselves while under chemical control. The cruelest detail is the garden. People plant brugmansia in their yards because it is genuinely stunning. The flowers are dramatic, the scent is intoxicating at dusk, and nothing about its appearance signals danger. Without knowing it, they are keeping a live pharmaceutical laboratory beside their front door. Beauty, in this case, is the mechanism of the trap. Where brugmansia works by erasing the mind's defenses, the next plant on our list takes an entirely different approach, and the weapon it uses is a protein for which no antidote yet exists. A plant can burn you alive without ever catching fire. That is not a metaphor. Sosnovsky's hogweed, Heracleum sosnovskii, ranks 5th on our list precisely because its weapon is invisible, delayed, and activated by something as ordinary as sunlight. Here is the mechanism. The plant's sap, leaf surfaces, and stem hairs contain furanocoumarins, photosensitizing chemical compounds that bond silently to skin on contact. Nothing happens immediately. No sting, no rash, no warning. Then ultraviolet light hits the affected area and triggers a photochemical reaction that fractures the DNA of skin cells. The result is severe 2nd and 3rd degree burns, deep blisters, open ulcers, scarring that persists for years. Eye exposure can cause permanent blindness. In extreme cases, burns have covered 80% of a victim's body surface. Children have died from contact with this plant. The cruelest irony is that Sosnovsky's hogweed was not a natural invader. It was an invited guest. Soviet agronomists deliberately introduced it across the USSR in the 1950s as a silage crop. Fast-growing, undemanding, producing staggering volumes of green matter. The botanist Idezi Sosnovsky had described it from the Caucasus, and planners saw a solution to livestock feed shortages. Tens of thousands of hectares were sown from the Baltic states to Siberia. The program collapsed when farmers noticed that cows fed on the plant produced bitter-tasting milk. By then, the plant had already escaped the fields. Nobody could take it back. In the wild, Heracleum sosnovskii is overwhelming. It reaches 5 meters or more in height. Its hollow stems are as thick as a human forearm. Its white umbel flower heads span up to 1 meter across. Its leaves are the size of a dining table. It looks prehistoric, almost alien, and that imposing scale is exactly what draws children to cut the hollow stems into makeshift telescopes and blowpipes. The contact happens in seconds. The consequences unfold over days. Today, it is classified as one of Europe's most aggressive invasive species, displacing native plants across roadsides, riverbanks, and abandoned farmland. Governments are spending heavily to eradicate it. They are not winning.
Fourth on this list is a plant that does not announce itself. It does not blister skin on contact or fill a room with the smell of decay. It simply stands at the edge of the water, green and unremarkable, offering fruit that looks like food. Cerbera mangus grows along the coastal fringes of India, Sri Lanka, Madagascar, and the islands of Southeast Asia. It is a handsome tree, deep shade, white blossoms with a faint sweetness, and fruit that ripens into large, oval shapes with a reddish skin. Travelers who do not know it often think they are looking at a mango. That resemblance is not incidental. It is, in the most precise sense, the mechanism. Inside that fruit is a seed. Inside that seed is cerberin, a cardiac glycoside that works the same way digitalis does, only without the margin of safety that makes digitalis medicine. Once it enters the bloodstream, cerberin begins blocking the ion channels that regulate the heart's electrical rhythm. The muscle slows, the rhythm fractures, then everything stops. What makes this particularly unsettling is what the death looks like from the outside. Nothing extraordinary. No convulsions, no visible hemorrhage, no chemical smell on the body. The presentation is consistent with an ordinary cardiac event, and for decades, that is exactly what it was recorded as. In the early 2000s, French toxicologists working alongside local authorities in Kerala conducted a retrospective analysis that produced a striking figure. By their estimates, Cerbera mangus may have been responsible for as many as 1 in 50 suspicious deaths in the region over the preceding decades. Hundreds of cases, all filed as heart failure. Standard toxicological screening did not detect cerberin. Modern forensic chemistry was required to find it. Until that capacity existed, the poison was effectively invisible to justice. The tree's local name, the suicide tree, reflects the other dimension of this story. It remains among the most commonly used means of self-inflicted death in tropical Asia, chosen precisely because the dying looks natural and the plant grows within reach of almost anyone. Next, a plant whose toxin takes a different approach entirely. Not silence, but the body turned against itself. Every muscle, simultaneously, with nowhere to go. Number 3 on our list is a tree that can keep you fully conscious while your own skeleton tries to tear itself apart. That is not a metaphor. That is the precise documented mechanism of strychnine, the poison found inside the seeds of Strychnos nux vomica, the strychnine tree. Here is why it works the way it does. Most poisons kill by shutting something down, stopping the heart, suppressing the nervous system, cutting off oxygen. Strychnine does the opposite. It blocks glycine receptors in the spinal cord, eliminating the inhibitory signals that normally prevent your muscles from contracting all at once. Remove that regulation, and every skeletal muscle in the body fires simultaneously, with escalating force. The result, arriving 20 to 30 minutes after ingestion, is a sequence of total body convulsions powerful enough to fracture the spine. The respiratory muscles are caught in the same violent storm. But the detail that makes strychnine truly singular is this. Throughout the entire ordeal, which can last several hours, the victim remains completely conscious. Each convulsion eases just long enough for the next to build. Death comes from asphyxia, when the muscles controlling breathing can no longer release. The tree itself gives no warning of any of this. It is a squat, tropical species with smooth grey bark, glossy leaves, and unremarkable white flowers. Its fruits look like small tangerines, orange-red and round. Crack one open and you find flat, grey seeds covered in fine, silky hairs. Those are the nux vomica seeds, and they have been misread for centuries. In the 19th century, pharmacies across Europe sold strychnine openly as a tonic and pest control agent. It became one of the most documented poisons in real criminal cases, and one of the most useful tools for literary villains, Agatha Christie among them. One more detail lodged in cultural memory. The muscle spasms of strychnine poisoning lock the face into a fixed grimace, lips pulled wide, teeth bared, eyes open. The medical term is rhesus sardonicus, the sardonic smile. It is the direct visual inspiration for the Joker's iconic makeup. Number 3 on our list kills through the body's own uncontrolled strength. Next is a plant that takes a quieter, slower approach, using rain and sunlight to destroy from the outside in. The most dangerous tree in the world doesn't look dangerous at all. That's precisely what makes it number 2 on our list. The manchineal tree, Hippomene mancinella, is certified by the Guinness World Records as the most lethal tree on the planet, and its greatest weapon is that it resembles exactly what you'd expect a harmless fruit tree to look like. Rounded canopy, glossy dark green leaves, and small yellowish-green fruits that hang in clusters like miniature apples, giving off a faintly sweet scent. The name the Spanish conquistadors gave it says everything: Manzanilla de la Muerte, little apple of death. Found along the coastlines of the Caribbean, Central America, and Florida, every single part of this tree is saturated with phorbol esters and a complex of diterpenoid toxins. Bite into one of those small fruits, and the burning in your mouth begins within seconds. That burning escalates into swelling of the throat, blistering of the mucous membranes, and necrosis of gastrointestinal tissue. Very few people have survived ingestion, and only with emergency medical intervention. But here's the part that sets manchineal apart from almost every other toxic plant. You don't need to eat anything to be harmed. When it rains, water running down the bark and leaves absorbs the toxins and drips from the branches, with the effect of concentrated chemical acid. Shelter under a manchineal tree during a downpour, and you risk chemical burns and skin sloughing across every exposed area of your body. The sap causes temporary blindness on eye contact and permanent blindness with prolonged exposure. And burning the tree is equally dangerous. The smoke carries the same toxic particles, damaging airways and corneas. Caribbean indigenous peoples understood this tree well enough to use it as a weapon, coating arrows and poisoning water sources with its sap. In 1521, Juan Ponce de Leon, the conquistador who first explored Florida, was struck by one such arrow and died from the wound. A tree that kills through touch, through rain, through fire, and through the simple appeal of looking like an apple. If that's number 2, what could possibly rank above it? A plant doesn't need to kill you to be the most dangerous thing in the forest. Number 1 on this list has never needed to. The gympie of northeastern Australia specialises in something arguably worse than death. Pain so absolute and so persistent that multiple documented victims described it as reason enough to end their lives. Dendrocnide moroides grows in the tropical rainforests of Queensland and to a lesser extent in Indonesia and the Maluku Islands. It reaches between 1 and 3 meters in height. It looks like an unremarkable shrub, broad, heart-shaped leaves covered in fine whitish fuzz. That fuzz is the mechanism. Every single hair on the plant's surface is a hollow silica needle roughly 5 millimeters long, filled with a complex peptide neurotoxin. Researchers at the University of Queensland spent years trying to isolate the active compound, and only in 2020 did they fully identify it, naming it moroidin. The needle's design is what makes it so insidious. It functions like a hypodermic syringe built in reverse. On contact, it penetrates skin instantly, snaps off at the base, and locks itself into tissue with backward-facing barbs. Complete removal is nearly impossible, and the toxin doesn't degrade. Dried leaves that have been lying on the forest floor for months retain their full potency. A gust of wind can carry invisible needles into the eyes or respiratory tract. Botanist Leslie Urbach was hospitalized for days after accidentally inhaling pollen from the plant. Survivors describe the pain as acid and high-voltage electricity applied simultaneously to the same patch of skin. It doesn't fade over hours, it often persists for days. During World War II, Australian forces conducting jungle training in Queensland reported soldiers rendered combat ineffective by accidental contact. One officer is said to have shot himself rather than continue enduring the agony. What makes Gimpy Gimpy uniquely cruel is its memory. Needles embedded in tissue can lie dormant for months or years, then reactivate when exposed to warmth, moisture, or pressure. A shower, a change in weather, the friction of clothing. Each reactivation delivers a fresh cycle of the same pain. Even touching the leaf through thick fabric can be enough. The needles penetrate textile.
This is not a plant that poisons through digestion or slowly degrades organs. It is an immediate, unrelenting, and chronically recurring pain system built directly into living tissue. The plant that comes next on this list works on an entirely different principle. It deceives. There is no antidote for ricin, none. A compound derived from the castor bean plant, something sold in garden centres, grown in flower pots, admired for its dramatic leaves, produces one of the most lethal substances ever documented, and modern medicine has no counter to it. That single fact opens the door to everything this episode is about. 13 plants, not rare specimens locked away in restricted greenhouses, neighbours, the oleander lining hotel promenades, the lily of the valley that smells like spring and childhood, the Dieffenbachia sitting on the office windowsill, the baneberry watching from the forest shade with its porcelain eyes. Belladonna seduced Renaissance women with its beauty. Monkshood killed through gloves, absorbed directly through skin. Brugmansia turned an Amazonian ritual into an urban crime tool. Sosnovsky's hogweed escaped Soviet agricultural programs and still burns children on vacant lots today. Cerbera concealed murders behind the mask of cardiac arrest for decades. Strychnine from the Nux vomica tree turned the last minutes of life into a continuous, unrelenting scream of uncontrolled muscle contraction. The manchineal earned its name, the little apple of death, through every leaf, every raindrop running off its bark, every fruit. And the Gimpy Gimpy embeds pain into skin at a cellular level, where it can resurface years later. Evolution built none of this to harm humans. These plants developed their chemistry to survive fungi, insects, bacteria, threats that existed long before we did. We simply kept walking into systems that were never designed with us in mind. If that changes how you look at the green around you, leave a comment and subscribe, because every episode ahead runs on exactly this edge between beauty and danger.